You want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond? Then you're in the right place. This is the Property XPerts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Diggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy.
Hello everyone, happy Friday. We've had a bit of sun this week, so I hope that everyone's a bit more positive. Sales, 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 buy. If you haven't listened to any of our episodes before, check us out on YouTube. It's the best place to watch us because we do share live slideshows where we share data information and much more than just Spotify. But if you are listening, thank you for coming along. Today is the 6th of March and we've got an amazing agenda today. As a bit of context, we are serial entrepreneurs running multiple businesses in property and construction. But if you're in other businesses, there's a lot of top tips in today's episode about how fostering maybe a good team might be beneficial for you to listen. So we're going to kick off with a preview of our investment deck in our surveying business. We pull investment decks together all the time for our developments, but it's very rare that we do that for a growing service-based business. So we're going to show you what that looks like. We're going to be talking about eNPS, which actually stands for, I believe, Employee Net Promoter Score. And this is an anonymous test that you do internally. So your employees do the assessment, but you don't know who's answered what. And it's a free go for them to have a say in what they would like to be improved in a business. Absolutely fundamental. And we're going to be sharing what scores we secured against our staff over the last 3 years running, because we've been doing this for 3 years. We're going to tell you how you can formulate that and do this test. Even if it's a team of 3 people, you will still get benefit from this, I promise. We're then going to go on to responding to public negative feedback. That might be client feedback. We're going to be talking about an article in our favorite magazine, which is Blue Bricks. We're going to be sharing the Old Maltings, which is a very old building that we're converting to 21 flats and building 2 houses in the car park. We're going to be going into, I attended an event specifically about social, affordable and temporary accommodation. So if you're not sure what those 3 asset classes are or tenures are, stay tuned because I'm going to give a full rundown of what the regulator is saying, who is at the front of the front line dealing with these issues and dealing with our housing crisis in the UK. We're then going to go on to talk about XP Boardroom. So Ben and I have both been part of boardrooms for almost a decade now. And that is how we hopefully give value every week. And we thought that we could do it well ourselves. So we've now been running that for 6 years. And we have some spaces available, but limited spaces. We're then going to be talking about a podcast, which we think, well, I think, Ben hasn't listened to it yet, you should be listening to. It's an episode that I thoroughly enjoyed. I'm actually only 3/4 of the way through, to be honest with you, but loving it. And then, as always, Q&A. If you're listening to this live, if you're listening to this after the fact, please still do ask questions because we will come back to them next week and answer your questions as best we can. Hello, Ben.
Nice. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week. As I mentioned earlier, we are 2 serial entrepreneurs, but fundamentally, as part of XP Property and the development and investment business, we are aiming to deliver 1,000 homes and £1 billion in property in the UK, and we do that collaborating with trusted investors. Sorry, I nipped in there on that one.
You got it.
Go on, you can crack on with that one.
So to grow our businesses, and it is a bit of a plug because we love giving other developers, other business owners value. But if you do know anyone or you are yourself wanting to learn while you invest, or alternatively, take a back seat and let us do what we do. We partner with investors to grow various projects, whether that's our service-based business that I mentioned or our developments. And we like to think we've built up quite a good track record. So if you are listening and are open to investing with upwards of about 250,000 into property, we would argue that the fee we would take as a shareholding might outweigh the value that we're going to add, i.e., sorry, the opposite way around. That was badly worded. The value we add will outweigh the shareholding that we secure because we've sold sites with planning where people have paid more for it than if they joint ventured us with us at the beginning when we bought the site. They would have made more profit. So have a think about that one.
Nice.
And this is one, actually.
This is one. So Jack mentioned we've raised a lot of money in our property development and investment business. We are actively running an investment opening for the XP Surveys business that we run, which is a geospatial surveying company. And I'm going to jump straight into it because it is the first topic, and we've got a very, very straight out of the drawing board deck, which we've literally been working on over the last kind of month to pull together. We're raising £150,000 to supercharge growth within that business. And what I wanted to do is actually show you where we've got to now with our investment deck. And for those of you that are looking to raise money for your businesses, obviously this deck will be slightly different in terms of a property investment or a development business versus a service-based business. But if you're looking to raise money in a service-based business, hopefully the structure of this deck, some of the content from this deck is something that you can take away and run yourself. And if you want a copy of this investment deck, just reach out, DM us, and we can send it to you. But fundamentally, it's relatively long deck. There's 20 pages in this, but we think it covers most of the key things that an investor is going to want to know at a high level to invest in our business and see the potential, which is essentially what we're trying to do, which we want somebody to buy into the growth, buy into the history of the business, how it's being run currently, and they can also see the growth trajectory and the profitability in years to come to make this a sustainable business that they want to invest into. So we're the UK's fastest growing tech-enabled geospatial surveying company. We've got an exec summary at the start of this, and I'm just going to read this out so that everyone gets a really, this exec summary is exactly what it says on the tin. It should be a really, really quick, high-level summary that somebody can read. The people that are reading this are probably going to be quite busy business people. They want the detail, but also they need it to be broken down into bite-sized chunks. And this first page basically sets the scene. So XP Surveys is a profitable tech-enabled geospatial surveying business modernizing a fragmented UK industry. With proprietary AI integrated operating systems, strong margins, and 300 plus clients nationwide, we're scaling rapidly. We're raising £150,000 to accelerate growth through technology and sales expansion, offering early access to a scalable, high-margin business with a rapidly growing and recurring client base. And then we're setting the scene for the future by saying 5-year target revenue of £5 million plus with 30% EBITDA margins. That's what is it? Equity before income, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That's the one. EBITDA. Yeah. I don't really like the term EBITDA. I prefer just like a net margin type figure, but ultimately businesses are valued on EBITDA margin, which takes away, the sort of, the taxes and the interest you're paying on loans, depreciation on plant and machinery and things like that to paint a sort of true comparable picture across businesses. So it is important, but I don't necessarily like it too much. So then on to kind of what we do, which just paints the picture of, what they're buying into, what services do we actually provide to the world? What are the problems in that industry? And this is really key because you're basically saying, look, this is why it's broken. This is what needs fixing, or these are the problems. And then you go on to the opportunities within that space. After that, we do go into kind of how we're going to solve the problem, how we're going to fix the problem. But we're also now setting the scene in terms of the market. How big is the market that we're going into? Nobody really wants to invest into a tiny niche market that doesn't really have the growth potential for the business to achieve the revenue targets that it sets for itself. So a little bit about the market size, how big is it? What part of that market are we aiming to capture? Where is the demand coming from? Ultimately, there's a huge number of transport and infrastructure projects that are going on in the UK. Surveying is fundamental to that. The amount of surveyors that we've interviewed that basically we can't compete with the likes of TfL, who are offering silly high wages because they've got HS2 to kind of deliver, and they need all these surveyors to get involved, and the packages that they're offering in terms of salaries and bonuses is just ridiculous, and we can't compete with that as a small player. But that is the opportunity really, for us to kind of grow into businesses that can supply to that sort of to that supply chain. And then the key growth areas at the moment, we're not operating in these spaces, but the benefits of the business is that we can grow into more services as we become very, very good at delivering the measured building and topographical surveys that we currently offer. There's huge amounts of surveying that we don't do at the moment in terms of earthworks and aerial photogrammetry and boundary surveys, construction setting out, all that sort of stuff are areas that we can go into. A little bit about us and basically kind of the key things that we bring to the party. The USPs really that we are selling as our competitive edge in the space. And we, from day one, our competitive edge has been technology. We've been the only UK-based surveying company that has an instant quoting tool that we've built from scratch that uses property data and algorithms to kind of speed up our quoting process. We've taken that one step further. We built an AI-based bespoke project management tool that we've now used fully in our business. And we've canned off Asana because we no longer need a project management tool. We've built our own, and it integrates with our own Xero accounting software, our Google Calendars, our Google Drive. All of the systems that we use within the business now basically funnel through to this nucleus that we've built, which is our project management portal. A little bit about financials. That's obviously key for anyone to see where we've come from financially and where we're headed. We had a couple of loss-making years where we were building the business, building the foundations of our network and our client base. We had a good profitable year last year, and we're set to kind of improve upon that this year in terms of both revenue growth and profitability. And then it's looking at the future. We've run a full 4-year cash flow forecast. Obviously, all the numbers and stuff that goes behind these figures is all in a separate spreadsheet that's very complicated and has all of the different line items of how we're going to achieve that revenue, how we're going to achieve the profitability that we're stating on these charts. But ultimately, an investor doesn't need to see that level of detail at this point. They just need to see the key headline figures of what revenue targets you're aiming for and what EBITDA margins are you expecting to see from that revenue. A little bit about us, who's the business being run by, and why is that important? Well, it's important because both Jack and I have built and scaled businesses before. We've got a good insight and a good network within the industry, and that's all great stuff for an investor to see. Got a team behind us. It's not just Jack and I. We've built the client portal. That client portal slide should actually be further up with the USPs, but I can shift that around. And then a few statistics, just high level, kind of where we've come from, who we work with, what's our turnaround time, how far a reach do we have, and all that really good stuff. A little bit of credibility in terms of the types of clients that we've worked with previously, testimonials from those clients to say how good we are, and then ultimately, why they should invest. What's the key things and the reasons why somebody would stump up £150,000 in our business to make a return in the future. And all of these things are, things that we foresee as a great opportunity with the experienced team that we've got. We're already income generating, we're already profitable, we've already got a good client base, and that is only growing month on month. So I said a big thank you to the team earlier. Basically, we are 5 days into the month of May, and we have already secured 50% of our monthly revenue targets. I mean, that's just ridiculous. If we do actually continue on this trajectory, we will have our best month on record this month, which is super cool. And then what are we after? We're after £150,000. We want that for a two-year runway, and that money will be spent in this way. We'll increase our sales team, increase our marketing, bring in some new operational team to help deliver on the additional surveys that we're planning. Obviously, we need surveyors for that, and then some of that money is going to the tech development of our portal. Annoyingly, the figures are sort of covered over here, but we've got sort of 33% in tech, 29% in marketing, 17% in sales, et cetera, and our contact details. So hopefully that's a good insight for you guys to see how we're trying to raise the money, the type of thing and the effort that we put into creating information that is easily digestible, that is that paints the picture of our business in the best light, and gives us the best chance of success in raising that money. If you're tuning into this and you are interested in investing in XP surveys and want to review this deck in further detail, or have conversations with us offline, drop us a DM. We would love to speak to you. Or if you know anyone you think that might be interested in this type of thing, then again, pass it on to that person, get them to DM us, and we will be in touch. Cool.
Shall I take this one?
Yep.
So eNPS. So hopefully, if you're listening and you have a team, I'd probably say this is most effective if you have a team of more than 2 people. We in our businesses, we have about 15 people in our Henley office within reason, and the same again in the Ben's Aura architecture office in Clapham. And the eNPS score stands for Employee Net Promoter Score. The word promoter is kind of like, would they recommend it to others, which is almost rather than saying, do you like our company, because they'll associate it with their role, you're kind of asking for everything outside of their role. So the ideal outcome for this is you're trying to do analysis on the business. So whether you're a cleaner or you're an estate manager or you're an accountant or in acquisitions or whatever it may be, you're trying to judge the business on its merits for a business. And it's super interesting because the assessment is anonymous, and you don't actually take a name, you don't know who's answered what. And the fundamentals of this is to give your employees a chance to actually speak their mind without being judged or without hindering their day-to-day work or their line management or whatever it may be. And the way that its promote score is because typically if a company is great to work for, they would promote the company. So there would be people that are willing to promote that they work in an amazing company that they want to work for. So if you're listening to the podcast, what you may not see on the screen is it's essentially graded out of 10 or 100%. And you go through a series of questions where you ask people, out of 10, how would you recommend working at the company? Out of 10, how has your role improved in the last year? And we set up a series of questions, and we're happy to share our eNPS questionnaire. So if anyone out there would like to do this on their own company and would like to start with a pretty good advantage of hitting the ground running, just comment on this video, eNPS or something along those lines, and we will make sure that we or someone in the team will get that across to you. But we go through a series of questions. We actually do some multiple choice questions, and we have some questions which we leave completely open to text. So, for an example, if you could change one thing about our company, what would it be? We can't multiple choice that or grade that out of 10 or 100%. So you quite simply allow open-minded thinking and open communication with your employees. Now, I know some businesses that might be thinking there, well, I don't really want to know what the company think. I want them to do X, Y, and Z. But the reason that you do this is company retention, also company understanding. You would automatically think when you're hiring someone, the most important thing is remuneration. One of our questions asks them, what is the most important thing for you in a company? Is it career progression? Is it enjoying the role that you're in? Is it remuneration? Is it, being able to have flexible working hours? So when you ask these questions, you actually, interestingly, get different responses to what you think. And it allows you to adapt your company packages to cater for the type of person that you might be employing. Quite a lot of our company are more driven by by job satisfaction and enjoying working in the group. And a lot of ask for typically flexibility. So if you can actually cater packages for that role, your job retention is going to be better. They're going to be happier. And you're not going to be throwing things at them that they might not necessarily need or want. So we have quite an explorative bunch of questions. That one that I just mentioned, recommendations for the places to work in the company, career progression, direct line management. How is your relationship with your exec line manager? And we go through all of these questions, and then we average all of the scores. And typically from sort of 0 to 30 is not great. From 0 to 230, there's room for improvement as a company. From 30 to 70 or 3 to 7, it's healthy satisfaction. Sometimes in a business, you cannot please everyone. And sometimes you need to make decisions as a business, which are actually fundamental. And it's almost like saying to an employee, to give you an example, if you had one wish, what would it be? And they said, win the lottery. It's not a realistic goal. So you do, as a director, manager, business owner, have to analyze what is an achievable goal within the business goals. So for an example, we work in quite a cute grade 2 listed office, and it has compromises. It's not huge. And we know that it's not an amazing office environment for some of our staff, but if we wanted better, it would be 5x the cost. So is that a viable business decision? And there has to be some give in some areas. If everyone on this assessment said that our offices are crap, then we would take a different view and be like, actually, that's our weakness. But we know it does get busy, and we try and manage that as best we can. And we all want to be in a swanky office, but we also need to make money every month consistently. And then 7 or 70 plus is exceptional satisfaction. And kind of the rule of thumb is if you can get an average score between sort of 7 and 8, it basically means that you are creating. There's always room for improvement. I feel like there always will be, because if you did this assessment on Google, for an example, they will have flaws in their service delivery for their clients, for their staff. And it'll be different things. It'll be like, I don't like traveling into central London every day. The commute is annoying, or, such and such that sits 2 desks away from me is really loud, or whatever it may be. You cannot get, rarely, I don't think I've ever heard of an assessment that's 100%. And I'd be amazed if there are. And also you have to acknowledge that you sometimes have employees that aren't right for their role or the company. So you will get a soften on that scoring. But anyway, to give you the scores that we scored over the last 3 years, I think the first assessment that we did, we had a slightly smaller team. We actually scored 8.6 average, so 86%. Second year was about 8.3%, and this year was 8.44. So it's sometimes a bit difficult because not everyone answers in the company. So it's more likely to get negative participants, because positive participants don't necessarily just want to go, yeah, everything's fine. Why really do the assessment where the motivation to do this is to provoke change, which I love. I love it when as many people that, it's a lot easier when you're in someone's review and they're complaining about the company. You just say, well, did you do the eNPS? And if they say yes, great. That's the whole reason it is in place for the company to make changes and to improve the business. So across the board, early sort of 80 to 86%, which we're super happy with. And I actually feel a lot of our employees love the team, the mold, how dynamic we are, how everyone's willing to help anyone. We're all sort of singing off the same hymn sheet. We're the underdog fighting in a busy market and punching above our weight, which is amazing. And that's really good culture to have in the business. And I suppose just out there to any business owners or team leaders or whoever it may be, I think you can actually spot early cracks and early signs of problems in culture or the business from the lens of the employee by just doing this test, because they feel comfortable to rip the piss out of you, basically. Some of it you may be able to change, some of it you might not be able to change, but you're trying to give them the opportunity to communicate that. And it's a really cool process to follow. The way that we structure these is we create a URL link that feeds through to a Google form. The Google form is a really adaptable, interchangeable document that you can basically have however many questions you want. You can do multiple choice, open free talking, yes or no's, score out of 10, whatever it may be. And then when it's been filled out and submitted, it auto populates to an Excel sheet in the right columns for the questions. So you can start pulling averages, you can summarize sections, and obviously, if one of the sections was what is your name, you would know who's done what. So we just don't have a section that asks who's who, and they fill it in and it kind of shoots it into the mix, the blender. And then we read through it, digest it, come up with ideas, try and adapt and change what we can or what we think is valuable to change, as well as ourselves. Because fundamentally, we can't do what we do without a team. And if that team aren't firing on all cylinders or are happy, then it could cause much more disrupt for us, whether it's rehiring, recruitment fees, a bad egg in the basket or whatever it may be. So we love doing this. It's a really exposed opportunity for you to hear the nuts and bolts of what your business looks like through a lens. And I actually really enjoy going through them because it's been so long since I've been in employment. And when I was in employment, I always used to think they shouldn't do that or they should do this. And it was really annoying that it would come across negative, me making a suggestion or an idea. because it's their idea and they feel that they're the boss, they do what they want. But I kind of feel this, 3 people sat next to me feel this, and nothing's happening about it. But this is just a carte blanche. No one knows who's talking. Straight for us to read. It's legible. It's well. We try and put questions in that prize value of change, and I love it. I think it's great. It was actually Dorian that mentioned this to me originally.
Yeah, I mean, it is great. It sets the temperature of how your business is performing, in the war room, really, in the engine room of the business. So yeah, it's we've already earmarked a few changes for this year. Some of those are likely to be kind of more routine kind of team get-togethers or team lunches once a month, or things like that, where it just gels the team a little bit more together, and yeah, promotes that sense of kind of camaraderie and sort of family, I guess. So yeah.
I was also going to add one thing we haven't mentioned, is you can use this as a marketing exercise for hiring people. This is what the people are saying about your business that are in your business, and you can tell people that you're interviewing, it's all well and good saying we have a great culture in our team. Yeah, great. What does that mean? Do I believe you? But if you say in the last 3 years, we've scored 8.6, 8.2, 8.44 in our eNPS scoring, it actually gives them fundamental value of how they will feel in the company, hopefully, and is a good way to attract talent.
Nice. On to more negative feedback and things. Aura had a 1-star review last week, and I just wanted to sort of talk through some of this, the process that we've gone through here, because obviously that's horrible to hear. 6 months ago, this particular client kind of threatened us with a 1-star review based on some of the discussions that we were having. And there's often a very, very your first response is to basically go through his list of qualms and like attack them back and respond and say that isn't true, that's not correct, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. But fundamentally that's no good. That's not how a professional company should approach things. We took a couple of days to kind of digest what was being said. I made sure that I had all the facts with the team in terms of that particular project, and I'm not going to go into the detail around the particular client. Sometimes you get difficult clients that maybe aren't quite the right type of client for you. Fundamentally, over the last 8 years, almost 9 years now with Aura, we've done over 400 projects, and I think we have four negative reviews on our Google. So people, it's always bad to see a 1-star review on your business, but when it's kind of diluted with 25, 30 other 5-star reviews, people can kind of see through that, and your response to their review is almost more as important as the 5-star reviews that you've got. So coming up with a well-written, a very kind of impartial, non-combative response is absolutely the type of thing that you should be producing. And historically, I've always bounced ideas off my wife, who's in marketing, and she's helped me with a lot of these sort of responses in the past. But now we have things like ChatGPT and Gemini. I use that to help basically curate a response that I thought was fitting and well put together. Basically told ChatGPT the picture, uploaded the actual 1-star review, then gave it our version of events, and then said create a response for me, and then ultimately got Gemini to almost kind of check over the ChatGPT response and suggest some other potential ways in which we could soften it or get our point across, or whatever it needs to be to kind of create what we thought was a good response. And we posted that today, a couple of days after the 1-star that came through on Friday night, I think, and we posted it sort of Tuesday morning. I wanted to make sure that I did have all of the genuine kind of the facts from our team in terms of how the process went, where the mistakes were potentially had, what actually happened, and yeah, it took a couple of days to kind of curate the right report and send it back. But it's never nice to get. You are gonna, as a growing business, we've like I say, done a lot of projects. There are going to be some negative reviews, and it's how you deal with them, I think, that really kind of sets you apart. And I hope that people can kind of read our response to the client's feedback and see that it's maybe not as bad as the 1-star review gives out, or we've approached it in a very professional way that means the client is still going to want to move forward with us, because they absolutely should. This was a blip in kind of the delivery of our services and how we operate. And yeah, some clients are more difficult to work with than others, but yeah, hopefully that's useful for some of you that will get this type of negative feedback as you grow your businesses. On to good news. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the Blue Bricks magazine. I wrote an article on commercial to residential conversions, a developer's guide. And this was off the back of the free downloadable guide that should be in the link down below. If it's not down below, you can go to the Aura blog website, and there is a commercial to residential conversion blog page where you can download the free guide free of charge. But it's I think a really well kind of scripted one-stop shop all the way through kind of finding the assets, what to look for, how to utilize Class MA and Class G and other prior approval permitted development rights, how to take those baseline approvals, enhance them with full planning applications and combining PD with full planning, how to upgrade the aesthetics of the building, produce private gardens, terraces, balconies, all the stuff that we like to do to enhance our schemes and add extra value. Some really key things that I learned from the Berkeley group in terms of designing efficient floor plates and standardization and regularizing the bathrooms and kitchens and all the good things that basically get you 1% marginal gains, make you better than the developer next door, and ultimately hopefully drop some bigger profits down to the bottom line. So if you want to get that free commercial to residential conversion guide, head over to the Aura website, or hopefully there's a link down below where you can get directly to it as well. Cool. And just like the value you get from those guides, hopefully you get value from listening to these podcasts. We know you do. If you are listening to this, drop a like now if you can, because it really helps tell the algorithm that people are interested and like listening to it. Rate us on Spotify, drop us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you are tuning in via audio format, head over to YouTube, watch a couple of live videos on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, there is a specific section that says live. And all of these podcasts in video format are stored in that live section, because we are very visual. I went through our whole investment deck for XPS. You don't get to see that on the podcast. So, head over to YouTube and take a look at some of the videos on there. Cool. We made a decision last week to, let's wind things back. We've been in this project, the old Maltings in Abingdon, for a good couple of years now. We wanted to try and sell the units as fast as possible. So we brought in an off-plan sales agent. Queensbridge Estates, well known, well respected. We've enjoyed working with them. And they've managed to sell, I think, now 7 of the 16 units that we put to them. But ultimately, we wanted to sell off plan because of speed. We are now sort of 2 or 3 months away from completion on this site, and fundamentally we haven't sold as many as we'd hoped to. So we're taking things back into our own hands. Queensbridge have got another couple of weeks in terms of their instruction to try and push some of the sales that they were in discussions with through. But we are now taking back control of the site and launching it to the open market. Queensbridge were purely off plan, purely to their network of investors and sort of private off market kind of sales through their respective sales agents. So this site has not hit the open market yet. And we know that there's been a lot of buzz around it. We know from locals that, they're interested to understand what's going on. And we think that with a good sales wind behind us, with some good advertising and marketing, and some good local sort of agencies on the case, we think we can sell these units, the remaining units, just as fast as the off-plan sales agent. So I wanted to sort of run through that. Also say, what are we doing now? Obviously, it's been off market to date, but now we're going on market. So we've got to be visual. We've got to be in people's faces. We've got to make sure that everyone around the local area knows about this development and that it's launching, now, and that we've got 50% sold, and put a little bit of impetus into the local sales market. So on screen, you'll see the front elevation. This is on a main busy road that you come into Abingdon from. We've got a big section of the building that's very prominent as you drive past. So we're basically going to be putting a 7 meter by 1.5 meter high banner, which says, the branding of the site, that we've got 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. We've got 50% sold. They're coming soon, available now, all that good stuff. Scan the QR code, find out the details, etc. We're also having a show flat, 2 show flats created, and we're doing an open launch day. So our plan over the next week or so is to launch on all of the portals, Rightmove and On the Market, all that sort of good stuff, build up some big demand, not do any viewings until Saturday, the 19th of April, and basically create a bit of pent-up demand like we did at our Marlow site. Marlow in January last year, we had 42 people visit site on a Saturday as an open day. We had 8 units in the Marlow site, and within a week of that launch day, we had 5 of those 8 under offer. And hopefully, that sort of pent-up demand, people all there at the same time thinking, I've got to outbid this person, or oh my God, they want the same unit as we want. We're going to have to put our best foot forward. That sort of fighting and bidding for units is something that we're hoping we can create as a buzz around the site.
I noticed that the 19th of April is Sunday.
That's the wrong date then, is it? What's the Saturday? Oh, it's the 18th. Yeah, it's the 18th. So the 18th of April is correct. So yeah, Saturday, the 18th of April, we're going to be launching fully. The site won't be complete, but it will be, close to it. We're going to tidy up the site, make sure that how the site appears on entry is really important to set the scene and create a good first impression for any buyer. What we're going to be doing on screen, you can see we're going to be creating a show flat out of one of the Undercroft units. These units are really cool. You can see it in the CGI. It's got an exposed brick arch ceiling, which is one of the original features in the Undercroft. We've got a 1 bed that we're going to be furnishing. I've circled some of the windows here. You'll see those windows are going to have branding that says, show home, welcome to the old Maltings, 1 and 2 bedroom flats, 50%. So all that good sort of sales stuff, just to create that buzz around the site when people come to view it. And for those of you that are beady-eyed, we will be removing this disabled parking only sign above this door, which should have been removed a long time ago, to be honest. But yeah, that's a little bit of insight into how we're going to be marketing this site over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Hopefully we can create a really good buzz locally and shift some units. We are seeing an uptick in both viewings and offers. We are very happy to say that we secured our second sale at our Muswell Hill site yesterday, and at a really good level to where we pitched things. So yeah, things are hopefully on the up.
Ben, is that the actual final design of the advert banner?
No, this is the first draft, so there's lots of feedback that I need to go back with.
On the building.
This advert. Yeah. Everyone loves my sketches on Bluebeam. Does exactly what it needs to say. But no, this big banner underneath is what's going to go in this location, but we need to add contact details. I want to make these CGIs bigger. There's a few changes, but this was the first draft, which still looks good, but can be improved upon. Cool. I'm going to have to dart off, so I will leave it to you.
You need to stop.
Can you share your screen? Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'm off to, for those that are interested, I'm off to Rome. We are watching the England-Italy game on Saturday night, I think it is, with some of the lads. So I have to shoot off very, very shortly.
Safe travels.
Nice one. Enjoy. Have a good weekend, everyone. I will leave it to you to crack on.
So, social housing, much more exciting than going to Rome, I would say. I had the absolute pleasure to go to probably actually my first social housing event, that's just social housing that I've ever been to. So it was in central London. It was an event that was actually titled Affordable Housing Conference. I think there was probably about 100 people there. Little shout out to Ground Up because it wasn't as busy as our event. But that is because the topic was social housing. And believe it or not, as unexciting as it sounds, the reason I wanted to go is because we've built a social housing portfolio. We actually built just over £25 million worth of social housing stock in South London, I wanted to kind of skill up a little bit because we were supposed to do a let and forget strategy. We've had issues with RPs and had to jump in and roll up our sleeves, but we kind of didn't expect to do that. To give you an example of what that may look like, is our social housing stock is on commercial lease. So it's a full repairing lease with a business. That business is responsible by and monitored by the regulator to manage the client. So it's their job to keep it full, keep them managed, keep them cared for, keep them literally cared for, as in not only living there in a well-to-do, suited, good condition apartment, but also actually the care, because ours is supported living as well. But anyway, we've got much more involved down the chain and had to do a lot of work over the last few years, which has been stressful because obviously the tenant type isn't one that can wait. There's obviously regulation and compliance around that, and equally, we need to make sure that those tenants are cared for. Otherwise, the sort of you could call it the sort of the supply chain of that means we might not get rent. So we've been very involved, and the reason I went to this event was network, understand new trends and changes, and skill up on social housing, affordable housing, temporary accommodation as such. So I've literally got like dozens of pages of notes. So I'm going to be going through. I thought it would be best to start off with the types of social housing that we're aware of and that I could hopefully bring you guys up to speed on. And then I would also go into regulation, why the regulator exists, what they were talking about, what is not so good to be doing in the market today, talk about people getting potentially deregistered and various things like that. And then going into just fun facts that I learned about the event. There were some big players in there. We saw Level Development Group, Vistry, Muse, The Hill Group, Avison Young were there, Savills were there. Some of the speakers were, really corporate big firms, and it is becoming more prevalent. Affordable housing in councils. There was a council panel. Is so important because private developers can deliver units, and there's targets for the council to deliver units, but it's double win if the council managed to secure a unit that essentially is affordable and a tick on the box for units into the economy. So to start off, it was quite a good venue because it was. I do much prefer auditorium style like this if it's quite educational. There was obviously a bit of networking going on there, but to go into the topics that we talked about. So we talked about affordable housing. So generally, what is affordable housing? Something can be open market rent and affordable housing, temporary accommodation, social housing, supported social housing, and then shared ownership were all of the categories that we talked about. We also talked about feeding in Section 106 into affordable housing, or some form of contribution that goes to the council and how they deliver units, which is where the big developers come in. So just to go through them promptly. So affordable housing is typically considered a rent that is sub 100% of local housing allowance, and typically at or below 30% of someone's income if they're working. In London, you can expect to pay up to like 50% of your income. In other areas, it's sort of between 40 and 50, and that is where affordable housing comes into play because you're typically in areas where it is affordable. Temporary accommodation is typically where the government / councils house people that need housing in short-term accommodation that need it the most. And that might be B&Bs, that might be in properties that are typically owned by private landlords like ASTs, but on nightly rates. That could also be hotels. It could be literally anything for a short-term fix. I've got some really interesting facts about the cost of that to the taxpayers' money, which I will share shortly. You've then got social housing, which is typically similar tenant type, or typically similar tenant type to affordable housing. Temporary accommodation, but it's a longer structured lease. So rather than saying a night, they might stay 12 months or 18 months or 24 months. So to the taxpayer, that secured income that the landlord, which is us, is securing, is beneficial to not only to the tenant because they've got structure, not only to the council because it's cheaper, but also to us because it's more predictable income. Therefore, we're happy to take less capital. Typically, the more noisy income is, the higher the margin an investor, owner, asset owner would expect. And it's obviously a really bad solution. It's obviously integral to the system, but a really bad solution from a cost perspective. To put it in perspective, it's a bit like if I said to you, imagine I give you 100 grand, right? So you don't have a job, you don't know where you're going to live, and I give you 100 grand. Obviously, it is pretty sensible to probably get a hotel for the night or the 2 nights, and work really hard on finding a longer term solution. But if you stayed in that hotel for 3 years, that £100,000 is very rapidly getting diminished, and there's very little scope for that to be potentially reused. So it's a high cost, short-term solution. And obviously the purpose for temporary accommodation is to provide a short-term solution. But we need to make sure that short-term has a soon or fast end date into social housing, or even supporting the person to get back into work, wherever that may be. Then you have shared ownership, which I actually think is a really cool concept. So shared ownership is typically, if you're developing a site and you're doing over 10 units in Oxfordshire, for an example, we would typically have to make an affordable housing contribution. That could be an off-site contribution, so financially. That could be an on-site contribution, which is units. Once those units are handed over as a affordable, Section 106 or affordable housing, they would then typically be bought into by an affordable housing provider, either the council or whoever it may be. They may underwrite the deal, so they may say, we're interested, we'll buy them when they're done. They might do a golden brick structure, which is where they typically just fund the deal all the way through. So they buy the land, develop it out. You are at no net loss for delivering it. And also your finances alleviated because you haven't had to deliver that. And there's many other structures, but the end product could also potentially be shared ownership, which is where the support is you're buying into half a home because the affordability isn't there. And whether it's the government that are underwriting it, or investment companies that are underwriting it, or pension companies, they benefit from that mortgage being paid off. They benefit from that capital appreciation. And at the point of exit, they've benefited from half the gain, as it were. So it's not great as a consumer, but if you can't afford to get onto the property ladder fully, it's basically like fractional. So you're buying half a house. When you sell the house, you still get half of the house, the benefit of the income. So all day we were talking about these strategies, the good, the bad, and the ugly, what the regulator likes, what the tenant types are, what the banks think, what the investment markets think, what Savills think, what the government think, what is the strategy of getting out of this affordable housing trap that we're in, which is forever becoming more of a problem. And that's not also to mention the private market. So I'm obviously coming into this industry with a private market lens. I'm looking at this thinking, well, we can't do what we need to do to deliver houses. So how are they doing what they do? And it's actually quite an active market for affordable and social housing at the moment, because it is more viable. Housing is needed, and margin doesn't necessarily need to be made the same. So I'm going to go into a few things. So talking about the regulator specifically. So the regulator of social housing is essentially the governing regulatory body that monitor this sector. We actually had a guy called Jonathan who sits at the front of basically approving RP regulation. And interestingly, he said that to boil it all down, the regulator is looking for 3 things. Now, if you are a property investor developer, I'd highly recommend that you focus on ensuring whatever stock you're delivering, even if you're not the managing agent or the regulated provider or even the social housing provider, that these 3 things are met by your tenant. If you are an RP, obviously you need to meet these 3 things. And that is quality of care, quality of stock, and new homes and financial viability. Now, what I mean by that is they care about the client care. They care about the stock, so the care is caring for the tenant. So that is communication, operations, fixing problems when they're there, pastoral care, disability care, medical care, mental care, whatever it may be. Stock is bricks and mortar. What's the quality of the asset? And then last but not least is financial viability. And the reason the regulator wants to see those three things is because they're the three most sustainable things in this sector that they need to see. Because obviously, if you're not providing the care, you're not really doing your job. If the stock's a pile of crap, why should someone live there, and why should you revenue that room or flat? And then last, financial viability. Can you actually build in a lasting business plan? And which I found was really interesting, because it seems like this space is heavily regulated, heavily monitored in the public eye. It's not a great space to be in the public eye. We are actually speaking to an RP who got a mention in an article which wasn't positive, but they hadn't actually done anything wrong, but they were getting pulled into the mud. And when you boil it down, care, stock, financial viability, it is quite straightforward. So there are three principles which I thought were really three really interesting things to take away. The regulator also mentioned that they do not like when an RP, a regulated housing association, outsource their management. And the reason being is because the buck stops with that RP. They can't, it's a bit like us being an MOT center, but we're sending our cars to get MOT somewhere else. If we've got a license to do that, why are we letting someone else do it? Because we're not technically in the detail of signing that off. And obviously with people's lives, personal care, that's amplified tenfold, which was a really interesting thing that they also said. They're currently pulling together a new standard for 2028, and they're working on a framework which is coming out. And that's pretty much it from the regulator. One other thing I would say is that developers, private investment companies, and some Wild West shooters are trying to get RP status, trying to buy RPs, or trying to go through the regulatory process themselves. It should take about 6 months. It actually takes 15 to 20 months. There's no reason behind that. They're just under-resourced, ask a lot of questions. Therefore, the cost time frame makes these RP status businesses quite valuable. So a lot of people are buying RPs. So to give you an example, Octopus Energy, who was actually on one of the panels, bought into an RP. So they bought a group of companies, including an RP, so they could automatically manage and own social housing, regulated social housing, which improves governance, value, etc., etc. Cool. And then on to the sort of next step. So as far as RPs go, you have a variation of different models. So a common and really well-known way that regulated providers or housing associations typically drive their business is they buy new build stock. They get government grants, which was a huge topic. Where are the funding lines? What funding lines are available to these regulated providers or housing associations? So they own stocks. They literally buy stock with a grant. Then they own their own stock, and they provide the management and care and housing in the local council. Council are also promoting these things too. Another option is they could just be a social housing management company. So I talked about outsourcing the management and care. There's other operators that are more service-based businesses that just provide the management and the care. Third to that is the lease-based models. And these were within any sector. This is social supported. This is temporary accommodation. This is disability care. This could literally be anything. This could be asylum seeker housing. There's also a third model, which is where a provider is like a management company, but they take leases on buildings that they do not own, and then they lease them back out to the tenants. They basically sign a management lease, like you would see Regis sign a lease on a big building, then manage it as an office, and structure a strong lease that way. The regulator isn't massively keen on lease-based models. They'd much rather ownership models. I kind of feel it's kind of contradictory. And the reason I would say that is because lease-based models are actually more cost-effective than temporary accommodation, but temporary accommodation still exists. I understand that it needs a purpose of short-term living, for short-term solutions to longer-term problems, but I believe that lease-based models are more suitable for the stopgap between that. So I feel if you remove lease-based modeling, You then have a temporary accommodation model and a new build model, and your build rates aren't strong enough to support the supply. So the problem that you have is landlords are absolutely daylight robbery, stealing money from the taxpayer because it's really expensive to go down the route of temporary accommodation. And then you're waiting for sites to get finished. I mean, how bad is the planning process to deliver housing for the UK, which is required, doesn't actually keep up with the amount of people, the actual growth rate of the population, but not only the migration rate as well. So the problem we have is that gap in the middle, which I feel lease-based models provide that stopgap. So it's a longer term lease, cheaper cost. To give you a bit of context, if we went down the temporary accommodation route, you could expect a person to be in a self-contained studio for about £100 per night. We charge £200 per week in our supported social housing. That's supported social housing, which is technically 100% of local housing allowance. So the cost difference is £100 per night against £200 per week. Is the cost difference between temporary accommodation and lease-based models. The cost base then for new build social housing is obviously significantly cheaper, especially when you look at the grants that are coming into place. I haven't actually done the maths on new build, but I wouldn't have said it's that much cheaper than lease-based models because the landlord has already done a conversion fit out to the building and it's not a new build. So I would say there's an argument there for it to also be a strong fundamental part of the market and the pipeline, which I think is interesting. So I've covered off the regulator, lease-based models, new build social housing and temporary accommodation. I'm now just going to spit some fun facts at you of things that cropped up in the day that I found was super useful. So starting off, the government is looking to launch a national housing bank. If you are in a end product that could benefit from this, from your tenants, your providers, or whoever's in your buildings, I'd highly recommend you sort of double down in trying to find out how they can get those funding lines, because they're looking to do, from the 1st of April, the National Housing Bank, 1% interest on loans to provide social housing and affordable housing in the UK market space, which is crazy. There's, out of all of the tenancies in London, 2% of the population is in temporary accommodation, which is crazy. And there's a further 5% that are on the waiting list. Now, I think, let me just find this stat. I had a really good stat, which I want to share, which is the total cost of temporary accommodation to the government / taxpayer. Which is how I'm absolutely amazed that it exists. Here we go. So this was actually released by Ben Denton, who's a senior temporary accommodation manager at L&G. He announced that we currently house 135,000 households in the UK in temporary accommodation. Believe it or not, out of those 135, I think there's something like 80 to 85,000 children out of that population that are children. The total cost of the taxpayer per year is £2.8 billion, which actually works out to be about £20,000 per household. So if you take my sort of metric that I used in lease model housing support and associations, it would come in significantly cheaper than that. But the problem we have in this country is the attraction for landlords is getting, I suppose, squashed by the regulator because they don't like lease-based models and easier fixed models. So the beauty of lease-based models is an RP could have 1,000 rooms and take on another 10, 5, 3, 15, 50, 100, whatever it may be, simply by the strike of a lease with an existing landlord, utilizing that stock that's already created, not waiting for the lag of developing sites. But the problem we have is that is not even anywhere near the waiting list at approval that we need to triple the amount of social housing to get everyone out of temporary accommodation and resolve the problem. And that's a growth rate. But also this problem of 135,000 homes and the cost of 2.8 billion is increasing by 10% per year. So the problem is increasing by 10% a year. To put that in perspective, imagine if your team or your family grew 10% a year, or equally your business grew 10% a year. It's a huge change. And we really, really need to get that resolved. Equally, this is a pretty crazy stat. Temporary accommodation costs to the taxpayer, remember, across the UK has increased 25% in the last year, and in London it's increased 40% in the last year. So to provide housing nightly, the cost in London has gone up 40% in 1 year, and that is not the gross amount that we're spending. That's per pound. What do you get back from it? So that is an increasing cost, and the problem that we have is we're so desperate to house the people, which is an obvious issue that needs to be resolved. We're kind of doing what we can, but doing what we can isn't temporary accommodation. It isn't a short-term model. It's thinking about a longer-term model. It's about thinking of a framework. You can't go into a £2.8 billion turnover business, which is what this is. That's the cost of this per year, and go, right, what can we fix in 3 months? It's just not going to really move the dial on the needle, or even save costs, increase margin, improve efficiency, reduce headcount, improve quality. These things are just not possible, and unfortunately it's from the socialist government, which is a little bit of something to add. What other useful facts are? I actually want to move on to some interesting facts actually about the developers that were in the room and what they're doing and seeing in the market, which I think is really relative. So I'm kind of parking social housing to some degree, but before I do, in the investment panel, they were talking about the yields that pension companies and big investment companies are typically buying into shared ownership and build to rent investments. And they said around 4% for institutional funds to buy into shared ownership and build to rent, which to SME property developers just seems like an extremely dry proposal of return and not that exciting. But I think I've covered off most of the interesting facts. I mean, there's literally tons to go through. I've got pages and pages and pages. Maybe if you've got any questions on anything that I've talked about and mentioned, just fire them in the question box and I will come to them. But I'm going to move on to housing. So I think one of the most shocking things that I heard from the developer panel, so we had a panel with Lovell, Vistry, Muse, Hill Group, and chaired by Avison Young. Super interesting panel because they're all talking about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. But equally, what I found interesting is such a pivot at the moment into affordable housing and joint venturing. So I don't know if you are aware, but Ben's obviously prevalent to this because he used to work at the Berkeley Group. The Berkeley Group, most of their schemes are joint ventures with Thames Water or National Rail. The amount of registered housing associations, impact-driven funds, ESG funds, pension companies that are JVing with builders now, house builders like the Muse, the Vistry, the Lovell, the Hill Group, is astronomical. Most of their big schemes are joint ventures with one of those outfits. And it's interesting to hear from our perspective because as we mentioned at the beginning of this session, we partner with investing partners. But we're missing a trick by not looking at other JVs, whether it's landowners that can't deliver but want the tenure at the end. They want to sign a lease. Who knows? That's basically how we built our social housing business model. But some interesting facts. So Lovell, who in 2015 were delivering 35,000 units a year in delivery. So that's 2015. That's good headwind. That's a good amount of units to be delivering. Today, they're delivering 5,000 units and 85% of those are affordable housing. Now, how you think to yourself, how have we gone from they've depleted by 7 times? They were delivering 35,000 units. They've gone down to now 5,000 units, and actually 85% of those affordable. And one of the key reasons is sales rates. If you're a developer, there's no good developing 100 homes that can't sell because there's not demand in that area to sell them. So sales rates is a really key thing for new build development. One of the benefits to new build development is you can phase sites that you have a tailwind of sales rates. So you deliver 10 while you can sell 10, or you deliver 50 because you know you can sell 50, or and then you phase the site to deliver more through the rate of movement, death, marriage, divorce, all of those sort of things, that the steady movers in the market. Or alternatively, if the market's really booming, you crack on with one phase and deliver the whole site. But the reason that these large developers like the affordable housing is they're typically a guaranteed exit. They're forward sold, they're forward funded, there might be golden brick, there might be pre-approved, there might be early commits, and they can still develop, they can still bring in the cash flow of development through the construction business while they've got a sale that they don't take market risk on. So what this is telling me is all these developers are doing this at the moment, selling high amounts of affordable housing or forward sold housing or JVs with affordable housing providers or social housing providers, because there's no exit risk. As a developer, a large risk in our game is exit. And seeing these big players do this is interesting and has actually made me rethink business model, who we're working with, how we're working with them, who can we JV with. And to give you a bit of context, there's a scheme that the Hill Group are developing, and they're JVing with Popular Have. It's a 50-50 structure. They get debt funding, Hill Group deliver it as a developer, profit margin split, blah de blah. It's an 818 million GDV site. So that is 100 times larger than our largest site, which is absolutely crazy on a JV structure between basically an affordable housing provider and a developer. These people do come together and generate results. Another really interesting stat, again from the Hill Group, is they've got a JV with the Cambridge Council. They are basically, the land is owned by Cambridge City Council. Cambridge City Council sell the land into a joint venture between Cambridge Investment Partnership and the Hill Group. Once that land is sold in, it's then a 50-50 split. The council fund all of the development at 3.5% interest. They buy back the affordable back into the council, so they've got their own guaranteed exit by the investment company, and then they sell the rest private and split the profits. So again, there you've got the council being the land owner, provider, seller. You've then got the council being the funder. You've got a delivery partner, and all of that JV was 1,300, helping them hit the 1,300 affordable units targets in Cambridge. So that's private developer, council working together. So massively admirable. Hopefully that's made you think a little more about joint venturing with councils and actually trying to break down those doors, because it is amazing hearing of a private company working so well for the benefit of both parties with the council. And it was actually really refreshing having head of affordable housing at Cambridge Council say, we are just looking for creativity, which is amazing. I absolutely love that. I think that's it for my points. I know I've drifted on a little bit, but I'm going to crack on with the episode because we're now running a little bit over time. If you haven't done before, or if you haven't run management accounts, profit and loss and balance sheets, you are missing out on understanding is what is underneath the bonnet of your company. I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. We have a referral code for Xero, which you can redeem through this bit.ly link. Equally, we have a filing system, which is for receipts and invoices and things like that. We also have a discount code there, which is off Dext for 12 months. So Xero for 9 months, you get 90% off, and Dext is for 12 months. The Boardroom. So Ben and I have been part of Boardrooms for best part of, I would say, almost a decade. Ben and I have always joined separate ones. And during COVID, both of our boardrooms sort of closed fold, and Ben and I wanted to join new boardrooms separately. We thought it was good to have a community, good to have people around you scaling, good to have people to look up to around you, good to have people to give you sound advice and a sounding board. And there wasn't really a boardroom out there that we really enjoyed, meeting the people or understanding. So we set up our own. So we've now been running this for about 6 years. We've had some amazing people go through the ranks in the groups, go from no deals to 10 deals. And we massively love it, and we get huge satisfaction out of it. And it was kind of one of those things that if there's nothing out there, create it yourself. We have a limited opportunity for people to join. We are also ratcheting our pricing up because we have had such good feedback. So if you are interested in scaling any form of business, we're going to have at least 2 rooms, up to 5 million, and then 5 million plus in delivery. Please do reach out, DM either myself or Ben, or comment Boardroom, and we will send you the details. If it's something for the future, completely cool. But even if you just want to have a browse at the brochure of what we cover, we're more than happy to. We have quite structured sessions, but it's very relaxed. There's other people around you that are consistently in the same room every month. We do 3 or 4 face-to-faces a year, and the rest are remote, so it's very flexible. And we do go through the sessions, and we typically do accountability, what was achieved this month, what we're achieving next month. Before we've done that, we've already set the year's goals out with you, going through every step of the way for the help of scale and growth and areas to focus on. We will then typically move into deal deep dives. Deals go in the room and we start pulling them apart, adding value, showing how we analyze deals and add value to deals. We then typically do hot seating. So if you've got any business issues, any gripes, any systems, any strategy that you need to tweak or change, or anything that are firefighting, and you get everyone's in the room's input, obviously ours, as well as everyone else. We then go into accountability for the next session, and there's a constant 24/7 WhatsApp group where you can ping ideas, ask questions, and sometimes just send photos in. So if you are interested, please do comment Boardroom. We'd love to hear from you. And again, we're looking to have good, honest, transparent people that are willing to put themselves out there into a small, tight-knit group to really get the best out of this year. Just a little plug, actually, this last one. I'm a massive follower of Dodge Woodall's podcast. If you don't know him, he's an entrepreneur that set up Bournemouth Sevens, which is, I think, one of the first sport festivals down in Bournemouth, obviously. I love the guy. He's pretty stand-up guy, he's pretty placid, and he asks good questions. He's not that extravagant. He's pretty straight down the middle guy. But he's fascinated by entrepreneurs, by criminals, by people that have been in serious situations in the RAF, Navy, Army, or whatever it may be. And he's interviewed quite a few interesting people, including gangsters, etc. He also interviewed Rob Moore. Not sure if he liked him. But anyway, me and Ben are fanboys of James Sinclair. And I've been following James Sinclair for probably a decade now, been to his events, listened to his own podcast. Just absolutely love the guy. He's a very old school entrepreneur, business owner, straight talker, fun to listen to. And this particular episode helped me learn a lot more about what he's up to now, his business, what he's doing. And I think it was a really good interview. So just a little plug to head over and listen to that interview of James Sinclair. I'm not sure we have actually time for this question, but Jace, as always, thank you very much for asking questions. Hey, Jack, great video. Which funds do you use to fund the planning for these projects when getting subject to planning to use investor funds or company cash reserves? And for someone to start out without a cash pot for planning, is it better to stick with stuff with full consent of competitive advantage elsewhere? Really good question. Kind of a mixture of the two, really, if I'm honest. We sometimes have schemes that are fairly straightforward to get capital funding from investors, and we will fund them with investors' capital. Obviously, however you agree that with the investor, if you don't get the planning, who's filling that gap? Is it shared risk, etc.? But typically, we're funding at risk with our own capital reserves. What I would recommend is packaging up that project to give the planning process someone a multiplier of their capital. I'm a big believer that if you put in capital like 15 grand for planning risk, you should really double your capital. Once that's happened, you're then crystallizing a planning consented site, and there's a new structure going forward. So I'd recommend don't discount those deals that require planning, but de-risk it for yourself so that you only buy the site if it's got planning, and you also structure a deal with an investor that they're taking an element of risk on the capital. Obviously, have the best planning consultant that can advise them, so the liability is more on them than yourself, because they're the specialist in the area, so they can ascertain the risk that we're running. But fundamentally, if you can structure two deals in that way to get the planning and then roll into the project, that would be the best way. You don't want to agree like an 80-20 structure with the planning ingrained into the whole development, because that is not, it's kind of a two standalone things. Hopefully that has answered your question. And that's it for the episode. Thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. One huge favor that we could ask is, we put in a lot of effort into this podcast, and we've got an amazing bunch of loyal listeners. And I know that a lot of those have subscribed, but I'd recommend if anyone out there has anyone that they may think would benefit from this channel, please do share it with them. And if you all subscribe, that is really, really, really useful. It's just a click, but it enables us to help build the channel, build the ideas, get more people asking questions, and give everyone else more value. But thanks again, and see you next week.